I was always someone who had a hard time figuring out what my purpose in life was. If you were to ask me when I was younger what I was passionate about, I would have said, I don't really know. And by passionate, I don't mean, yeah, I like it. I mean something that really provides you that sense of awe and wonder, or how Naval puts it, something that feels like play to you but looks like work to somebody else. But I was the kid in class who just lied when we asked what we wanted to be when we grew up. I would just throw out something random, different every time, like a doctor or something like that, knowing full well that this was not where my passion lied. I never understood someone who had found their calling in life. I mean, there's just so many things out there. Are you sure that you found the one thing to the exclusion of everything else? I mean, why and how are we supposed to decide on just one single thing? So I felt weird. I felt alienated because there was just so much societal pressure to decide on this one thing. And I couldn't. So this was very stressful for me. I felt like something was wrong with me. It wasn't until later that I realized the problem wasn't with me, the problem was with the question. And so today, I would like to share with you how I found what I see as my purpose in life and what brings me a sense of meaning and fulfillment. I have never felt more peace, more power, more confidence in the path that I am on today, even though this path is perpetually uncertain, which might seem paradoxical at first, but by the end of this video, I think it will make sense. My hope is that this may benefit some of you out there who feel the same way that I used to feel, and from talking with a number of you, I know that is the case. So first things first, I would like to revisit what I call the trilemma, which was this framework I introduced in my last video. I actually realized the trilemma could be simplified down into a dilemma, with tri meaning three things to solve and di meaning only two. And I would call this thing the great dilemma. The great dilemma is the choice between either passion or profit. I think of this as the great dilemma because it is a problem that almost all of us face. Do we work to live or do we live to work? Do we do what we love and potentially accept less income as a result? Or do we put that aside and try and earn something that'll give us a good income, but at the expense of being able to do something that we're passionate about? And so the problem is we often cannot have both of these things, right? Or it's very difficult to achieve both of them. If we could, that would be the dream, right? Now, from this dilemma, once you make a choice between either passion or profit, it expands into the trilemma that I talked about earlier. And I'll talk about that more in a future video, how these two things are related. By the way, I hope that these frameworks and phrases and this stuff is either helpful or at least interesting to you. It's very helpful to me because I'm a very visual person. These are the kinds of frameworks that I use to conceptualize things and make sense of things inside of my own mind. So I hope it is also the same for you. So with the great dilemma, there are actually several layers to it. At its deepest layer, we could think of profit as the material world and passion as the spiritual world. They are connected to one another, but they are also diametrically opposed to one another. For example, a renunciant monk may be able to make incredible progress in their spiritual life, but they may also have to beg for food in order to survive in the physical world. On the other hand, a hyper-rich individual may have dominion over the physical resources of the material world, but they may have no knowledge over the inner workings of their own mind or the universe or their place in it. Now, if we take things up a layer, we could say that the two components of the great dilemma are just resources and meaning. And this is where I would like to focus today, specifically on the meaning side of things. Because I think today, many people are starved for a sense of purpose in their lives, because when faced with the great dilemma, they choose resources over meaning, sometimes out of necessity, and sometimes because they do not know what actually matters to them. They do not know what their calling is. This was the case for myself. As I said in the beginning, I did not know what really mattered to me. I did not know what my calling was. Growing up, I had many varied interests, and that was kind of the problem. My interest was in variety and how the variety of things all connected to one another. It was not in a singular thing. And yet, at every major milestone on my journey to becoming an adult or a fully functioning member of society, I was continuously forced against my will to narrow my focus on one particular thing. In elementary school, you learn a wide variety of subjects, but then once you enter high school, you begin narrowing your focus by selecting some courses, and then if you intend to pursue a degree, once again, you must narrow in even further, and each time it's for this 4-year period. And by the time you're studying for a degree, this 4 years of focus on one particular subject is a very long time to focus your attention on something that you're not even sure you want. And then, of course, once you enter the workforce, at this point, you've gone through a series of narrower and narrower funnels until you have arrived at this point where you have specific knowledge over one single subject, and you're effectively in a silo. You better hope you chose the right one. So as I was going through these funnels, I thought to myself, well, this is a shit situation. I don't like this one bit. But I didn't know why I had such a problem with it. I just thought that, again, I was weird, or there was something wrong with me, and I just kind of needed to deal with it. At some point, I came across the FIRE movement. And when I found this out, that people were escaping their own silos that they had put themselves in through this knowledge about money and being able to retire in their 30s, I thought that this was the way out of my silo too. I thought if I could retire extremely early like these people, then I could have all this time to dedicate to really figuring out who I am, what really mattered to me, and what I wanted to do with all of this time. But there is a whole host of problems with that, and I talked about it extensively in my last video, so if you haven't seen that, check it out. So instead of trying to make the goal to desperately retire in my 30s, I made it to desperately try and understand myself. I said, whoa. Hold up, man. Once you have all of this time in your 30s, what exactly are you going to do with it? And how exactly is that going to help you figure all of this out? Well, I'm gonna build a cabin. I'm gonna chop wood every single day. I'm gonna be able to meditate, do all the exercising I want to do, gonna be able to do martial arts, yoga, lift weights, study all the ancient texts and esoteric materials I want to dive into, gonna be able to play piano and guitar and make films and explore my art, and it's gonna be great. But then I realized, wait a second, my friend. You've got free time right now. Remember how you quit your job in that whole thing? Got yourself some financial independence already? Couldn't you just do all of that stuff right now? And that's when I realized that's actually not what I really wanted. Now, don't get me wrong. I enjoy doing all of those things. I mean, come on. How many times have you seen me chopping wood in one of the little films that I've made? I obviously really enjoy doing that. But the point is, that stuff is not what is going to give me a sense of purpose in life. What I really wanted was to give myself permission to be my actual, true, and authentic self. And for that self to be able to exist as a sovereign individual in the world. This is what gives me a sense of meaning and fulfillment and purpose every single moment of every single day. Now let's unpack all of that because it's a bit wordy. There's a couple terms in there that I want to break down. By permission to be myself, I mean no longer filtering my thoughts, words, or actions through other people's expectations. As I touched on in my last video, there's this phenomenon that happens in corporate workplaces where people become a shell of themselves in order to assimilate into the large organizational structure. This happened to me. And the reason people do this is because they are not sovereign individuals. Now, this term, the sovereign individual, is actually the title of a book that was written in the 90s, which pretty accurately foretold exactly what we are experiencing today, what I have come to think of as the information revolution. I'll have a lot more to say about this book in the future for sure, but for now, let's just think about this term, the sovereign individual. What exactly does that mean? The definition of sovereignty is freedom from external control. This is a very important point, and by now you might start to see some of the dots connecting here. I struggled to find my sense of purpose in life while I was subjecting myself to a lot of external control. Upon granting myself control, I began to feel like I had a sense of purpose. So I think becoming a sovereign individual is the path to finding purpose. Let me explain what I mean. Becoming a sovereign individual, aka a person who is free from external control, involves two main components. First, you must know yourself, and second, you must be yourself. Sounds simple, right? Well, there's actually a lot to this. To know yourself means to understand what truly matters to you once all externalities are removed. It also means to understand your true nature, which exists independently of your mind. But that's a topic for another day. For example, you may think that you really like drinking wine and that that's a big part of your identity. But do you really like drinking wine, or is it just a ritual that you use for social interaction? Let's imagine something for a moment. Let's say you're home alone, it's evening, and you decide to reach for a bottle of wine and pour yourself a glass. Maybe you walk over to the couch, put your feet up, turn on the TV, or grab a book, or hey, maybe even sit out on the patio and enjoy the breeze. As you're doing this, you think to yourself, well, hey, this is a really, really nice moment here for me. And then you proceed to reach for your phone to take a picture of this really nice moment to then put it on your story so that you can share it with everyone. But let's say, that's actually not allowed. No taking pictures, no sharing this on your story. In fact, you can't tell a single soul about this nice evening that you've had with yourself and your glass of wine. So then the question is, would you still want to do this? Would you still want to have this glass of wine? If this was the only way that you could have a glass of wine. Now you might say, yes, and you may genuinely love wine, and it may be a component of your social identity, and that's fine. I'm not saying that wine is bad. I'm just trying to create a general example here, because I think a number of people would actually realize that it's not the wine that they actually like. They don't actually like wine that much. It doesn't actually really matter to them. It's not a part of their identity. But what is an interest that you have that neither your friends or your family have? What is a value or belief that you have that no one around you has? What is something that you do on a daily basis that absolutely no one knows about? These are clues as to what really matters to you. Many of us are shaped by our families, by our friends, by our colleagues, by the school system, by our sports teams, by everyone around us, to the point where it smothers our own sense of identity and character with an amalgamation of everyone else's beliefs, interests, and expectations. So it's no surprise that you can't determine your own purpose when it's covered up by everyone else's. Now, to be yourself means to first know what that is, and then to fearlessly act in accordance with it. Again, free from all external pressures and influences. Of course, I'm not saying that if you come to the conclusion that, oh, the real me is a giant asshole, that means I get to go out into the world and be a giant asshole. That's not what I'm saying. Might want to work on that if that's the case. I'm saying you have to uncover what it is that you actually stand for, and then you have to stand for it. Most people, by the time they're spit out of these progressively narrower funnels and into their silo, they don't stand for anything. I didn't. Sure, I said things inside of my own head or communicated it to close friends or family members, but I didn't actually stand for it when it counted. Now I do. And the really interesting thing about standing for something is it comes with a risk or a cost. And this is part of the reason why it provides a sense of purpose. For example, talking about new material on my YouTube channel comes at great risk to me. I mean, come on. On one hand, talking about how to build a passive index ETF investing portfolio, and then on the other hand, going to Iceland to film some crazy visual experience about my journey through spirituality and titling it My Relationship with God, is not exactly the gold standard to finding success on YouTube. In fact, it's definitely turned some people off who just don't get it. But the thing is, I'm perfectly fine with that, because I want to connect with people who actually relate to me and the path that I am on. But of course, there's a whole other side to this discussion that we would be very irresponsible if we did not talk about this, because so far this all sounds good, it sounds nice, but we've been speaking in the mental realm. Remember, if we break down the Great Dilemma, we've been speaking in the spiritual side of things. We haven't talked too much about the material or practical or money-oriented side of things. And one of the so important parts of being a sovereign individual is having financial security. Financial security is a non-negotiable requirement because of the way the world works, the way these systems of society work, the way the game of life has been constructed by us humans. Financial security is a must if you want to be able to exist independent of external control. It is a must if you want to be a sovereign individual. The bottom line is we can't act like we are free from externalities if we have to rely on them for money. So to bring this full circle here, a true sovereign individual is somebody who has solved the great dilemma. They have found a way to merge the worlds of passion and profit, of meaning and resources, of spirit and material worlds. And the way I've personally solved the great dilemma in my own life and become a sovereign individual of sorts is by participating in what I think of as the information revolution. I talked about this at length in my last video, so if you haven't seen that yet, you can check that out. And in a future video that you can look forward to, I have another framework which I think of as the circle of serving, which is the mechanism through which a sovereign individual can solve the great dilemma in their own lives. So if you want to try and solve the great dilemma in your own and become a sovereign individual, I think the circle of serving is the way to do it, and I'll talk about that in a future video. And before I get out of here, just a reminder that these longer videos like this in this style are going to be put on Spotify, so you can just listen to them if you'd prefer to experience them that way. And also, I am sharing my extended thoughts on a whole variety of subjects on Twitter now, so you can follow me there as well. That's it. Bye-bye.